This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 185 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. We are taking things slow today because today's topic is slow travel benefits. I am a huge fan of slow travel, and weirdly, I haven't done an episode on it in years, but I feel like I talk about it a lot. So it is well and truly overdue to have another slow travel episode. And definitely I've noticed in the last year or so, slow travel seems to make it onto a lot of those kind of lists of travel trends and, the latest ideas. I don't think it's a new idea at all, but it certainly seems to be becoming more popular or at least more talked about. And it kind of makes sense because I think that slower travel is definitely more sustainable, and that's obviously a hot topic in recent years. And it's kind of the rebellion to bucket list travel. I am not a fan of going to tick off all the places or tick off all the sites, and slow travel is, I think, a fabulous alternative to it. And it's certainly something that I've seen people already talking about as a better way to travel post-coronavirus when we can actually travel again. I guess we've got the ultimate slow travel right now, no travel, but that's a little bit too slow for me. I can't wait to get back out there. Now, I have to certainly preface this by saying that I completely understand and completely can relate to people who are not on the slow travel bandwagon yet. If you're not converted to the idea of slow travel yet, I understand, and I used to be the same. And there's a lot of good reason why you might feel that you don't want to be a slow traveler, especially if you have a fairly limited amount of time when you travel. Maybe you only get 2 weeks a year to travel somewhere, and you want to make the most of that time. I get that because we've been kind of taught to think that making the most of your time is seeing the most in terms of, ticking things off a list. But I'm going to challenge your thinking and say, if you choose a more slow travel route, and we'll talk about lots of ways to slow travel and the benefits in this episode, you might not tick off the traditional lists, but you might really get a whole lot more out of your travels, a completely different experience if you just try and follow some of these slow travel ideas. So I would challenge you, if you're one of these people who's really not sure or kind of resistant, why don't you try and experiment just for one trip? Go to just one place, perhaps for, a full week or 2 weeks if you can. Don't plan too much. Just kind of let the destination reveal itself to you. It sounds airy-fairy, but I've done it and it's amazing. And I really feel that you get to know a place in a completely different way, rather than just trying to cram full every museum and every sightseeing spot into every minute of every day. So anyway, that's my challenge to you. And if you listen to this episode and you see that maybe my guests have a point, then I would really love you to try it out. And many of you will already have figured out that slow travel can be a good thing too. Not always, but certainly whenever you can. And I think you'll enjoy what my guests have to say today. So my first guest is Christine Williams, and she has been basically traveling full time for the last 9 or so years. So she has had plenty of time to practice slow travel.
So I would say that my partner and I are kind of the king and queen of slow travel, probably. We have traveled for the past 9 or 10 years. And compared to a lot of people, we've only hit just a few countries because we travel so slowly. Usually we like to spend about a year in one region of the world. So we did South America for about 8 months. And then the following year, we did Central America for 10 months, which a lot of people kind of move through it pretty quickly in just maybe 6 weeks or 2 months. But we find that if you travel slower, it's just a completely different experience. First of all, it's more sustainable, which our travel blog is all about sustainability. Mm-hmm. So that's really important to us. Obviously, cutting down on flights is a huge saver for your carbon emissions. So that's definitely helpful. And we just love to travel overland. We love to take public transportation. That has been a huge game changer for us. We began using public transportation more out of a necessity than a desire, because back in the day we were absolute budget backpackers.
Right.
So taking the dollar bus as opposed to the $10 taxi, that's like a whole day's budget in Central America. So that was an obvious choice for us. But then we found that the more we did that, the more taking public transportation and moving much slower. Yeah, it might take you a lot longer to take a 36-hour bus ride across Peru rather than fly. But you're going to have those experiences that the locals get. You're going to speak to people from the region. You're going to get recommendations for the best restaurants, where to go, places you would never get just out of a guidebook. So we love traveling overland. We always end up in really quirky public transportation situations where sometimes like we have like a baby thrown onto our lap and there's like a chicken.
I was thinking chickens. I'm so glad you said chickens.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Guatemala, the chicken buses, I mean, they're named that for a reason, because literally you might have a chicken right next to you. We've been in 4x4s with piglets, goats, tortoises strapped on the roof. It's been pretty insane. But all of that is just part of the experience, right? So we love that kind of slow public transportation travel for sure.
That is much more fun than just hopping a plane and skipping all that middle part, for sure.
Exactly. I mean, it makes a much better story. So it's definitely worth it.
It sure does. What about when you're staying in a destination? How do you kind of enact this kind of slow travel idea when you're stopped somewhere?
So sometimes we travel a bit faster. We travel in hotels and Airbnbs. And then every once in a while, we find a place that we just fall in love with, and we'll go to the local grocery store and look on the bulletin board and see what apartments are for rent. So we've stayed in a few locations and just grabbed an apartment for the month or 2 months. And that has been obviously an incredible experience. So we were in San Cristobal down in the south of Mexico for 2 months, living in an apartment with people from Mexico, from Chile, from Argentina, from all over the world. And of course, then you get to really get to know a city, and you get to find out what your favorite spots are. You get to know the locals. You get to know like the secret hidden spots. And that is just the best way if you have the time. I know obviously not everybody has the time for that, but if you do, I would highly recommend it. You may not get to see everything in the country, but you get to see everything in that area that you wouldn't necessarily experience if you're just zipping by for a few days or a week. So we've done this in Mexico. We've done it in Bulgaria. We did it in Medellin in Colombia. We stay in Bali for a few months out of the year and just get like a guest house for a few months or an apartment. And that just changes everything about how we see a destination and experience it. It's really incredible.
I completely agree. I remember a long time back, very early days of the podcast, I did an episode on slow travel, and my guest at the time described his definition of slow travel was when the barista at the local coffee shop knows your name and knows your order because you've stayed long enough that they know you. And I thought that was a great way to describe it, because that's exactly the thrill of staying somewhere for a longer term, is you get to build those kind of connections and relationships and habits and rituals.
Absolutely. And actually something we've been doing recently is house sitting. So we just did a house sit for 3.5 weeks in Vancouver, Canada. And then we did another one for a couple of weeks in Edmonton, Canada. And that is a really cool way to experience a location because you actually get to stay in somebody's house. So the whole basis behind house sitting is that somebody is going on a vacation and they want somebody to come and mind their house for them. And usually they have pets. So usually you're doing pet sitting, which is amazing because we can't have pets when we travel. So we love taking care of people's animals. It's so fun for us. And then you get to stay like a place in Vancouver for a month, which is kind of expensive. So it's nice to have a free accommodation. You get to live like a local in somebody's house, get to know the neighbors, get to know the neighborhood. And it's just a really cool way to travel.
So I think Christine covers off a lot of the benefits of slow travel, and she is definitely very experienced with it too. So you've got to trust her. Now, my next guest is Caro Ryan, and we talked about slow travel in the context of how you get around. And because, of course, Caro is a massive walker and hiker. So we talked about how getting around the planet on foot is really an awesome way to slow travel.
I think it was not so much about the act of hiking and walking, but it was the exploration, the curiousness, the wanting to learn, the wanting to see, where does this go? Can I get up there? What's just around the corner? I was a kid who I struggled with my weight a lot as a kid. And so exercise was definitely not a priority for me. But what I did have was that I called it my adventure gland. So so having and just dreaming of Enid Blyton and Famous Five and going on an adventure. It's like, oh, where does this take me? What will I see? What will be different? What will I learn? And I think the journey from that into then discovering it. Switching on, I guess, the exercise part of me. So definitely for me, walking is my main form of exercise and movement, and it's gentle on the body, it's gentle on the mind, it's gentle on the spirit. And, I want to live that kind of life of gentleness to myself and to the people around me and to the planet. And it's for me, walking, whether it be through the bush, in the forest, and sometimes that makes it all sound very lullaby and delightful and quite idyllic. And to be honest, quite often the types of walking I do are not like that, because I can also enjoy pushing my body to the limits, carrying a pack for many days or weeks on my back with everything I need, and climbing, mountains and sleeping on the ground and drinking out of the stream. And so there's that physicality, which is actually really nice. But more than anything, walking and moving around the planet on your feet forces you to slow down to the pace of your steps and to slow down to the pace of your breath. And to slow down to what probably is the pace we're meant to move at and live at and be at,
It's the natural pace we've been blessed with, isn't it? So
exactly,
that's probably the ideal way to experience the world.
Yeah, totally. And it's very much connected to, even though it is an act of, it's a doing, there's a whole lot more about it that's a bit of a being. You be rather than do.
You have the time, don't you, too? You have the time to really notice your thoughts, the world around you. It's
absolutely
a completely different experience to being on a bike or in a bus or on a train or on a plane, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think when you think how quickly we flip around our smartphone screens, we flip from one social media to another. We flip open the email, we shut it down. We flip open to Insta, we shut that down. How fast our minds have become, and that short attention span in little bite-sized chunks, and just it's a constant voracious kind of cycle. And walking, if you've got a definite start and a definite end, and you can only go at a certain pace, unless you're going to become a trail runner,
you can't hurry it up. It's just it takes how long it takes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Walking, it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful.
And sometimes if the storm's coming and, you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, I've got to be back in time to get my podcast with Amanda Kendall. Quick, I better run up the hill faster. You got to go with it.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of slow travel, slow walking, connecting to what really is around you, and it really sparks an awareness. And I think because you're not doing this multiple dash around smartphone screens, and the amount of information that's coming into your brain is reduced. What you actually do pick up is so much deeper. So you might have not the broad scope of information, but there's a depth. So you're actually really observing, and you're becoming aware of the bird sounds. You're becoming aware of the sounds of the wind in the trees, of that distant creek you can hear running, of the waterfall, what's that over there? Or, the sounds that you may not, it actually happens all around us in the city even, but we're too
not
busy.
Yeah, exactly. We usually just don't notice. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think a good long walk is very therapeutic in many ways, and it's also one of the best ways to actually get to know a place, isn't it?
Absolutely. So you get to know the place, but you get to know people because you've actually got time for them. Like, I love going on walks for meetings. So where I live here, I live in the Blue Mountains, and some of my clients and people that I work with, are local to here. So rather than meeting in a cafe or in a meeting room or in an office space, we'll say, let's go for a walk.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and we'll sit by a river or by a waterfall and talk through stuff. And I'm sure there's a whole lot of science around how your brain is unlocked when you're outside of your normal environment, but switched on in the creativity that I found comes from walking. Like, if I'm short of ideas, or if I'm struggling with something and I can't see an approach around something, I'll go for a walk. And, it's like a yoga thing, a yoga breathing. Like, you slow your walking steps, you slow your breathing down, you're looking just at what is in front of you. And it's amazing what it can do with your thoughts and your imagination.
When Karen talks about the information that you're getting when you're walking is deeper rather than broader, I think that is such an important principle, and it applies definitely beyond walking to all forms of slow travel. If you stay longer in a place, you'll get to know it more deeply rather than knowing a whole country more broadly. And I think that deeper connection to places is what often makes a trip, more memorable and more special. So that's what I love about it. Deep. Go deep. All right. My final guest today is Talon Windwalker, and we actually recorded this chat about slow travel, must be a couple of years back, because I mentioned my son being 8, but I've been waiting to use it, and because it's a really good chat. And we both had something quite important in common when it came to being slow travelers, because for each of us, it was our kids who really taught us how to do it.
One of the things that was helpful for me traveling as a kid is to learn how to slow down.
Yes.
I was the type of, when I was a solo traveler, I was one of those that's like, I get, pretty basic hotel room because I'm going to spend pretty much no time there except sleeping, because I'm going to be out and about all day, and I'm going to see absolutely everything I possibly can squeeze into this short vacation time that I have. And, just go, 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 go. And I saw a ton, but, by the time you leave, you're just kind of wore out. And traveling with a child, you have to do a different pace, and you have to allow more time to have chill time where they're just, going to relax at the hotel, or you're just going to, do a shorter walk, or, find a closer place to eat or whatever. And it was really helpful. I remember when we first started traveling, it was really hard for me because I was working in preparation to leave. I was doing my full-time job plus another part-time job, because the part-time job was the one I was going to continue doing while we were traveling. And so I was building up my familiarity with that and getting my production skills up, since it's the type of job that you're paid by how much you produce. And I wanted that in a good place by the time we left. So I was used to working, lots of hours, and then being a single parent, you work, you get your kids, you got to do dinner. Then you got a little bit of time for wind down, but not when you're working 2 jobs. So when we first went, we started out in Mexico on an island, and we were out the edge of the town in this kind of hostel and close to the beach. And it was hard for me to only do a few hours of work. And then in the morning while she was sleeping, and then when she'd get up, we'd go to the beach and we'd go snorkeling and just have this kind of very leisurely day. And after the first few days of that started kind of wearing on me, I was just like, well, I'm not used to this. And so I really, really had to work to adjust to just take that slow speed and not have a lot of stuff to do and be okay with that. And, she was a great teacher that way because she's all about fun and climbing stuff and playing with the dogs and swimming in the pool and going to the beach. What could be a more perfect day? Whereas, my former mind, I was, I got to do this. And now I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a real big culture shift for me.
Oh, yeah, I am nodding here so hard because I have learnt the same thing from my son. And I think it was only this year when I took him to Japan for the first time that I properly planned it to be a slow trip, like an appropriate for an 8-year-old kind of trip. And we had about 2.5, 3 weeks. And I based us just in Osaka and Kyoto and, didn't plan much and just did our, daily outings. And sometimes the daily outing might just be to the 100 yen shop and a restaurant for lunch. And some days it was to a temple. But instead of the old me, which would have seen, 25 cities in 2 weeks, not that bad. I've never been that bad, but certainly, I would have been trying to maximize my time. But we don't actually have to maximize the time because by taking it slow, we often get way more out of it than by rushing off to see everything.
I was just going to say that was one of the things that was huge for me in having to slow down, and just kind of going out because she doesn't want to see all the stuff I want to see. I'm not so interested in seeing some of the stuff she wanted to see. So we would compromise, and sometimes we would just go for the middle and we would just go walking and we'd end up, just taking a bus to some place and go, oh, this looks interesting, getting off the bus. And, we would try to get lost basically. And we just walk around and we had so many wonderful experiences and discoveries. I remember going out and finding this really cool church and some other really cool sites. And later when I was talking to one of the people at a hotel or something, and I was trying to describe this church to her, and she didn't know where it was. And I was explaining exactly where it was and everything. She had to look it up. She's like, I'd never heard of this place. And I thought, cool, I found something a local didn't know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that.
Great experiences, and especially finding the places that were populated mostly by locals. So you really got to really absorb the culture and see what life is really like there. And that's what I really enjoy doing.
I know my son will listen to this. He's going through a really obsessive phase about listening to my podcast episodes repeatedly, which is great because, of course, I'm very proud that he likes them. But so this is why I reluctantly say this, but thank you, because you taught me how to slow down and travel in a way that is much more fun and much more rewarding. So there you go. And I'm sure that lots of you who've traveled with especially young children have also figured this out. But now that he's older and we could travel at kind of any pace, really, I really try hard to keep those slow travel ideas in place because I know that regardless of who I'm traveling with, it is just so much a better way to travel for me. And I hope it might be for you as well. And if not, at least, as I said at the start, do have a try. So thank you very much for listening to episode 185 about slow travel benefits. Big shout out to my guests. So I started off by chatting to Christine Williams, and Christine and her husband Jules run a great blog called Don't Forget to Move. And they also run a really fun podcast called Not So Bon Voyage. It's about things that go wrong. And I know that listeners love those stories. So have a listen to Not So Bon Voyage. I then chatted with Caro Ryan, and of course Caro blogs about all of this outside walking stuff at Lots of Fresh Air. You can find her at lotsofreshair.com. And last of all, I chatted with Talon Windwalker, and his website is One Dad One Kid. That's the numerals 1dadonekid.com. In the show notes, I'm also going to leave links to a couple of other episodes we've done in the past about slow travel. They were episode 25 about how slow is slow travel and episode 44, embracing slow travel. They do seem a long time ago, don't they, now that we're up to episode 185. But I was happy to revisit this topic finally. If you are not in our Facebook group for thoughtful travellers, come along and join us. We are always having fun and sometimes some deep conversations in there. Just search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook. All of this info will be in the show notes for this episode. The show notes are at notaballerina.com/185. Happy planning your slow travels for when we get to travel again. And as always, thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.